So we chat regularly and he's become a good friend. This guy is very unusual. He's a pastor, he used to be a biker, he used to be part of motorbike gang, soft gang, the motorbike gang. He was a pro golf instructor, can you believe it? He's a pro golf instructor. He also has a pilot license. So very unusual man, I would say he's very unusual, original. If there's time, you'll hear about his prank later on. So he's very original, inquisitive, very knowledgeable, and articulate and honest. But most of all, he's a spiritual man. Whatever God tells him to do, he will do. You can interpret any way you want. Maybe he heard some sounds, okay? But the fact is that if he is convinced that God asked him to do it, he will do it. All right? So may I invite Leslie Quahe to share some reflections, please.
Thank you very much, Yang. I wish half of what you said was true. But pastors do. Let me greet all of you this evening. This is a really special occasion. I have no doubt in my mind that there's a good number here present today who would deliver a very eloquent and relevant speech. So I consider it a singular privilege and honor I will cherish in my last thoughts if I have the luxury of a deathbed. Thank you for constituting that. I'm not going to bore you with a long chapel service. It's not going to be a theological discourse. I was keeping my fingers crossed that Kiang wouldn't tell any of my stories. So God heard my prayer, and He hasn't. I'm going to tell you 3 stories from our time in ACS. But the setting of this is actually from 1 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 12. In that narrative, Samuel picks up a rock and he names the rock Ebenezer. And he tells the people that Ebenezer is a representation of the fact that God has helped us up till now. That is the meaning of the name Ebenezer. God has helped us up till now. I look around the room, and we've all taken different roads. However you choose to acknowledge God, or someone, something higher than ourselves, I think collectively we acknowledge we have not got here on our own ingenuity, volition, or creativity. So we gather tonight to give thanks to God, or however, as I said, you understand that, for the one who is greater than us, who has brought us and provided for us all of these years. So in that setting, what is my Ebenezer? And I would like to suggest to you, and you each have one, that my Ebenezer is here. It is our badge. This is my Ebenezer. And permit me 3 quick stories. So the first story taught me appreciation and accountability. Accountability. And you remember that we turned 13 and got promoted to secondary 1. The big change there was that our school badges were no longer sewed onto our shirts, but we actually had to bring this to school every day, right? And the people of usual species would be standing there to catch us if we didn't have our badges. So after repeated delinquency, I was sent to Mr. Ernest Lau's office. And I remember standing outside, he had a corner office at the end of the corridor, and I stood out there, and he looks at me and he says, "You again, come in." Tell me, Leslie, to what do I owe the honor of this visitation from you? I said, well, sir, I didn't bring my badge to school. He says, yes, you have forgotten yet again. And I said, no, sir, I didn't forget. I just didn't bring it to school. And he said, please explain yourself. And I said, well, this morning I got up and I got my badge, but my badge told me it was feeling ill. And when I touched it, it was actually hot to the touch. And the fact that it was in the sun by the window had nothing to do. But I remember those bronze badges? So I said, sir, so I touched it, and my mother said, if you have a fever, you should stay at home. So my badge had a fever, I left it at home. Plus, I didn't forget it. I didn't bring it to school. It was not well. I swear to this day, there was a little smile across his face. And he says, come here, boy. And I thought it was when I get a caning. But he opened his tray, and there were a few badges there. And he says, okay, since you speak to badges, I claim being the original badge whisperer. Since you speak to badges, pick one now that likes to come to school. So I went through the motions. He seemed to be on a game, and I said, sir, this one. And he says, okay, you may go. As I was walking off, I realized this was a great man. He didn't humiliate me. He didn't call my bluff. He didn't belittle or berate me. But it made me think. And after that, I never forgot to bring my badge to school again. And you know what? I still have that badge. It's so precious to me, I didn't dare bring it tonight, for fear that in this trip I would lose it, and then I can't face Ernest Lau when I meet him. But he taught me accountability. Make a choice now and be accountable for it. The second point is about courage. Courage. Fast forward to, actually backwards, from Sec 1 to Primary 4. We were having a music lesson by Mrs. Williams, aka
Old Black Joe.
Old Black Joe, in case you didn't hear it. So she was teaching us this song, remember? 10 little Indians, 9 little Indians, right? Remember that song? Okay, so I was sitting next to Iqbal. You all are very good, you get where the drift is going. So I'm going, 10 little Indians, 9 little Indians. And she stops, Leslie, what are you doing? I said, what, ma'am? Indian boy, what? So she calls Iqbal up, stands us in front of the class and says, class, who is fairer? All of you who think Iqbal is fairer, put up your hand. The whole class put up their hand. My first exposure to racial prejudice. How can Iqbal be fairer than I? Please stand up, Babu. The period after music was recess. As Iqbal exited the class, I tapped him on the shoulder and I smacked him in the face. He was bleeding, and I said, don't want to be Indian, now I'll make you Red Indian. Needless to say, the parents were summoned, and we had to be in the principal's office. Iqbal's mother, Mrs. Jomaboy, was there. My father comes in hurriedly. Keep in mind, my father was at that time principal of St. Andrew's School. I know you're quickly asking, what in the world are you doing in ACS? I come from a Peranakan family. All my cousins and uncles were saints. I was the Baba black sheep. So anyway, my father comes in, apologizing profusely. Mrs. Chimmerboy, I will make sure my son pays for this. And she turns to my dad and says, Mr. Quahe, I have no doubt you will hold him accountable. But let me make an alternative proposal. For the next month, after school, let me bring Leslie home. I will feed him, they will do homework together, and they will play together. For we must make sure that these two boys do not become enemies, and they learn to be friends. This was 1967. How far ahead of her time was Mrs. Aminaj Jumaboy? I didn't only make a friend, I gained a lifelong brother. She had the courage to bring change, a change of heart in Iqbal and I that has stood us in good stead till tonight. The last point is about sacrifice. Many of us here tonight have tried to exhibit service in our lives. I have no doubt about that. I see Jen Huat, Charlie, many other people benevolent in charity. But let me just say the obvious for the record. I don't believe there is any true service without sacrifice. Where did I learn sacrifice? Let me take you to Christmas 1973. The hot item advertised in all the media was a Levi's jacket. And that Christmas Eve, Wesley Methodist Church and Bark Road Methodist Church had combined caroling, which was wonderful because the whole purpose of caroling for teenage boys was to be amongst the girls. Oh, come on, don't be so. I speak the truth. So I got to Wesley Church before the caroling, and my heart fell because Leslie Quahe, hand up please. Leslie. Leslie Quahe was there and he was wearing a white Levi's jacket. And I knew I had no chance with the girls that night. Because they were all already swarming around him. And that evening, on the hot, un-air-conditioned Tekoyak buses, all the girls were cold. And they had to take turns to wear the Levi's jacket. So the Levi's jacket was the item of the evening. We finished caroling about 2 a.m. and the practice was to go from Wesley Church to Hyatt Hotel. You can have that in your mind, right? We walked to Hyatt Hotel because it had an all-night cafe and you paid, can you remember the price? 50 cents one? Free flow of coffee and tea. So that was the place to go. So all the kids, 2 a.m., no more buses, were walking down to Hyatt Hotel. As we go past the old cold storage, can you all picture that? The old cold storage where Center Point is? It had a little walkway and pillars. As I walked past one of the pillars, I saw a vagrant lying between the pillars to try and stay out of the rain and the cold. He didn't have a shirt. He had newspapers covering him. I remember as the group moved on, I stood there and looked at it and thought to myself, we've sung joy to the world. The Lord is come. Why is he lying here? But before I could conclude my contemplations, the sound of laughter and girls ahead of me drew me away and I forgot about the vagrant and I ran on. We finished our coffee and tea and made our way back to Wesley for the sunrise service where we would catch up on our sleep. But on the way back, as I went past cold storage again, I saw a sight that changed my life. Because lying between the pillars on that cold morning, there was a vagrant with a Levi's jacket. I quickly ducked out and looked down, and Leslie no longer had his jacket. I stood there and I could not believe my eyes. As a 16-year-old, I could not contemplate how my friend would sacrifice his prized item for a stranger lying on the street. It changed my life because thereafter, in my journey, whenever I was faced with a challenge to give something I did not want to give, I would ask myself, is this my Levi's jacket to give? So, thank you, Leslie. And when I checked with Leslie, he said that he hung back because he didn't want to make a scene about leaving his jacket. He didn't know that I was further back. We were in Australia with my family, and I'd like to thank the organizing committee for letting my family sit in the corner to represent me. But my wife and daughters are here. They will not be taking the buffet. They'll be going out for dinner. But I'm so glad and blessed to have them here, because last year we were in Australia, and on Father's Day, my daughters come into the room and they said, "Daddy, happy Father's Day." And I opened the package. They'd gone online and found a vintage Levi's jacket. Because they've heard this story many times before. So it wasn't only my life, but my family as well. Thank you. So, appreciation comes by us being accountable. Change comes through the courage we exhibit. We'll sing later this evening, Emblem of Grand Endeavor. This world needs courage now, more than it ever has. And service through sacrifice. If you haven't worked it out already, it's ACS. Our Ebenezer. The best is yet to be. To God be the glory. While I'm working out the logistics, can we be in an attitude of prayer? In whatever way you choose, think of your Ebenezers, the things you want to remember that have brought you thus far. And give thanks in whatever way you deem meaningful and significant for you. Can we be in an attitude of prayer and contemplation?
Quahe.